Between 2022 and 2023, central banks worldwide executed a financial move that should have terrified you. They purchased over 2,000 tons of pure gold. This massive figure marks the largest amount of gold purchased by central banks in a two-year period since 1950, covering the last 73 years. And this trend shows no signs of slowing down. In fact, it is accelerating. In just the first 3 quarters of 2024, these institutions continued to add another 789 tons, with full-year purchases predicted to exceed 1,000 tons. This means we are witnessing 3 consecutive years of buying levels above 1,000 tons, something unprecedented. Before 2022, the previous annual gold buying record was only 656 tons in 2018, and to find a comparable level of buying, we have to go back to the 1950s. The ones engaging in this frantic hoarding are not small retail investors. We are talking about the world's most powerful institutions like the People's Bank of China, the Reserve Bank of India, the Central Bank of Russia, the National Bank of Poland, the Central Bank of Turkey, Singapore, the Czech Republic, and even central banks of nations you rarely hear about. What is truly frightening here is that central banks do not act on emotion like retail investors. They do not rush to buy or sell just because they watched a viral video online or fear missing out when prices rise. They are organizations with access to economic intelligence that ordinary citizens can never see. They have teams of economic advisors who have studied every currency collapse in history. They possess internal data on capital flows, international trade settlements, government debt levels, and undisclosed geopolitical risks. Their intelligence agencies constantly provide information on the plans of other nations. When central banks with such a level of intelligence simultaneously start buying the same asset, this is not merely portfolio diversification, this is preparation, a precaution for something bigger. They are preparing for the potential collapse of the US dollar and the wiping out of the massive $37 trillion debt using the oldest trick in financial history, currency devaluation through gold revaluation. This is the very scenario President Roosevelt used in 1933. In this analysis, we will clarify exactly what central banks are seeing that you are not, the timeline they are following, and the specific mechanism they are using to position themselves ahead of the largest wealth transfer in modern history. Because once this mechanism is triggered, once gold is revalued and the dollar collapses, there will be no turning back. You will either stand on the side of the central banks or become collateral damage ruined along with everyone else holding dollars. According to the World Gold Council, the body tracking official gold purchases, in 2022, central banks bought 1,036 tons of gold, 1,037 tons in 2023, and as of the third quarter of 2024, they have bought another 789 tons, with the fourth quarter likely to push the total above 1,000 tons once again. This is a sign that we are in completely new territory, never before recorded in recent history. It is not just the volume, but who is buying and why they are buying. Among the gold-buying nations, China plays a prominent role. The People's Bank of China reported adding 62 tons of gold in November 2023 alone, and they maintained continuous additions for 18 consecutive months up to May 2024. Then, they stopped publishing data. This silence is not because they stopped buying, but because they do not want the world to know the true scale of accumulation. Most analysts estimate China has added between 300 and 500 tons to its official reserves over the past 2 years. But what is less discussed is that those figures are only the official reserves that China reports to the International Monetary Fund. China also has other gold purchasing channels that are not publicly reported, including state-owned enterprises, the State Administration of Foreign Exchange, sovereign wealth funds, and other investment vehicles. When combining all these channels, the estimated total gold China has accumulated since 2022 could range from 1,000 to 2,000 tons. China is accumulating so aggressively because they clearly see what is coming, the collapse of the dollar. And when that happens, the nation holding the most gold will be the winner in the global economic game. The Central Bank of Russia is also a key player. They bought 330 tons in 2022 alone, becoming the largest buyer that year, and continued buying throughout 2023 and 2020, despite facing the harshest economic sanctions in modern history. Or perhaps it is precisely because of those sanctions that Russia has accelerated its gold accumulation. We must remember that Russia had $300 billion in dollar-denominated assets frozen by the West in 2022. $300 billion they thought was safe in Western banks and securities vanished, confiscated overnight. The lesson from Russia's experience set a precedent and a warning for every other nation in the world. China holds over $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds. What would stop the U.S. from freezing China's assets if tensions escalate regarding Taiwan? Nothing at all. The precedent has been set. The lesson every central bank has drawn is, do not hold dollar assets that the U.S. can freeze. Hold something they cannot touch. Physical gold, safely stored in vaults in Beijing, Moscow, or New Delhi, the U.S. cannot freeze, confiscate, or sanction it. Russia currently officially holds 2,333 tons of gold, accounting for about 25% of their total reserves, the highest percentage among major economies, even higher than the U.S. gold reserve level of 23% based on official valuation. This is a deliberate strategy. As Russia witnessed the collapse of the Soviet Union, the ruble becoming worthless in 1991, and they have directly experienced Western financial warfare. They buy gold, not because they think the price will rise, but because they are preparing for a world where the dollar becomes worthless and gold is the only meaningful reserve asset. India is also actively participating in this trend. The Reserve Bank of India continuously adds to its reserves, buying 33 tons in 2022 and 41 tons in 2023. They buy steadily every quarter. Although the volume of each purchase is not huge, this consistent accumulation has raised India's official reserves to 841 tons. What few people know is that Indian households own more gold than any government on earth, with estimates of 25,000 to 30,000 tons held privately. This figure is larger than the U.S. government, China, and all Western central banks combined. As a nation, India holds more gold than anyone else, and they are still buying more. This stems from their historical experience with currency collapse, when the rupee was devalued multiple times. The people in the Central Bank of India understand that when currency fails, gold is what survives. This is cultural knowledge passed down through generations and is being proven right at this moment. The National Bank of Poland purchased 130 tons in the 2 years of 2022 and 2023, a massive figure for the size of this country. Their reserves increased by 57% in 2 years, from 229 tons to 3 tons by the end of 2020. The bank governor, Adam Glapinski, publicly stated that gold is the ultimate safe haven asset and that Poland is preparing for a less stable global monetary system. For a central bank governor to publicly admit preparing for systemic instability shows that Poland is positioning itself ahead of the impending dollar collapse. Turkey, A nation facing currency crises for years with inflation, once hitting 85% in 2022, added 160 tons of gold in 2023. When you are living in the context of currency collapse, you buy gold. The Turkish central bank knows this because they are experiencing it and are preparing for the next stage, when the situation could get even worse. Singapore, with its highly sophisticated monetary authority, is also quietly accumulating gold. Although they do not publish monthly figures, IMF data shows they have significantly increased their gold holdings. If Singapore, a country that makes no financial mistakes, is buying gold, it means they are seeing a potential risk. The common thread connecting all these gold purchases is every central bank is preparing for the same event, which is the end of the dollar's dominance, the collapse of the current monetary system, and the transition to a new mechanism. They may not know exactly what the replacement system will be. It could be a gold-backed BRICS currency, a basket of currencies, or the IMF's special drawing rights SDR, but they know for sure that it will no longer be a system based solely on the dollar. During the transition from the old system to the new one, gold is the only asset that every nation accepts. You cannot easily exchange yuan for rubles because currency swap transactions are complex, exchange rates fluctuate, and political relationships have a huge influence. But everyone accepts gold. It is the absolute neutral reserve asset. This is why central banks are buying gold at levels not seen in 73 years. They are preparing for the reserve currency transition, and this process is being driven by the weaponization of the dollar. The main driver behind this gold accumulation is the weaponization of the US dollar. This is the biggest game changer we have seen in modern financial history. Since 1944, the dollar has dominated global trade, and every nation has accepted it, even America's political rivals. But when the U.S. used the dollar and the SWIFT system to sanction and freeze Russia's assets in 2022, it sent a strong message to every other nation in the world: your assets are not truly safe unless they are physical gold stored in your own country. Even America's close allies received this message. They saw that if the U.S. was willing to do that to Russia, one day they could do the same to any other nation. As a result, an emerging bloc is forming, the expanded BRICS group, including Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and new members like Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. This is a collection of nations representing over 40% of the world's population and about 25% of global GDP, and they are building an alternative international payment system. They are developing a new trade currency, which could be a common currency or a basket of currencies partially backed by gold. Their goal is not to completely replace the dollar overnight, but to create an alternative path for international trade and payments so that nations do not have to remain dependent on U.S. control through the dollar system. When this system is implemented, the demand for dollars to conduct trade will drop sharply, pushing the dollar into a major crisis. Now, let's talk about the mechanisms central banks will use to wipe out America's massive $37 trillion debt and restore financial stability for themselves: gold revaluation. This is a simple but devastating concept. This mechanism was previously used in 1933 by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. At that time, the U.S. was heavily in debt and needed to address it. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, confiscating gold from citizens, and then, with the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, he officially revalued gold. The price of gold rose from $20.67 an ounce to $35 an ounce, an increase of about 70%. This achieved two important goals. First, it devalued the dollar against gold, meaning it reduced the real value of all dollar-denominated debts. Specifically, it wiped out 70% of total government debt. Second, it increased the book value of the government's gold reserves, making the balance sheets of the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury look much healthier. This is the very scenario central banks are preparing to reenact. With the current U.S. debt at $37 trillion and no ability to repay, the only solution is currency devaluation. If gold is revalued to the level some experts predict, such as $20,000 an ounce, then all debts would be wiped out with the stroke of a pen. This price is not random, but is the price analysts put forward to rebalance the U.S. debt-to-gold ratio, similar to the level before 1971. When this scenario occurs, those holding gold will see their assets skyrocket in value, while those holding dollars will see their purchasing power brutally destroyed through hyperinflation. Central banks are buying gold because they know the end game is gold revaluation, and they want to ensure they are the winners in this transition. This is not an event that will happen in the next 10 years. With the record pace of gold buying by central banks and the development of the BRICS system, the timeline for this event could be between 2021 and 2027. The window of opportunity is closing.